The orphan's sudden revelation. The sun was setting on the dusty streets of Korea, casting long shadows over the broken buildings and cracked pavement. The air smelled of burnt metal and sweat, thick and heavy. In the corner of the market square, a young boy named Rin sat on a pile of old crates, his eyes scanning the street for any sign of food or work. His clothes were torn, and his hair was matted with dust. He was an orphan, just like everyone else in Korea. Rin's life was a daily struggle for survival. He didn't remember his parents. He was too young when they died. The only family he had was a small group of street kids who, like him, fought for scraps and tried to stay out of the way of the cruel gangs that ruled the streets. Most of the time, he was invisible, just another face in the crowd. No one cared about orphans in Korea. But today was different. As Rin sat on his crate, trying to catch his breath, he noticed something strange. A sleek, silver vehicle hovered above the ground, its engines humming softly. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, too clean, too polished for the rundown city. People stopped what they were doing and watched it land in the center of the square. Rin squinted, trying to see better. A door slid open, and a figure stepped out. It was a man. No, an alien, with smooth green skin, glowing eyes, and a royal uniform that sparkled in the dying light of the sun. Rin's heart skipped a beat. He had seen aliens before, but never like this. This one was different. He was important. The alien man's eyes scanned the crowd, and for a moment, Rin thought he saw him looking directly at him. The boy quickly looked away, unsure of why he felt nervous. He had never been singled out before. He wasn't special, not by anyone's standards. The alien moved toward the center of the square, where the crowd had gathered. He raised his hand, and silence fell over the people. Rin could feel the tension in the air, like everyone was holding their breath. The man spoke in a language Rin didn't understand, but his tone was commanding, filled with authority. After a moment, he switched to common tongue, the language most of the galaxy used. "Attention, citizens of Korea," the man's voice echoed. "I come bearing important news. This world is under the protection of the royal house of the Jurian. Our empire has decided to claim this planet for the good of its people." Rin frowned. He didn't know what the royal house of a Jurian was, but it sounded important. And it wasn't long before the alien's words took a sudden turn, leaving Ren frozen in place. "I am here to find the rightful heir of the Ajurian throne," the alien said, his eyes scanning the crowd again. This time, his gaze seemed to lock onto Rin's. "You, boy, step forward." Rin's heart pounded in his chest as the crowd parted, allowing the alien to walk toward him. Everyone's eyes were on him, and for the first time in his life, Rin felt a rush of fear. He didn't know why the alien had chosen him, but he was sure it wasn't good. He tried to move, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. The alien stopped in front of him, and the crowd fell completely silent. The man looked down at Rin with an unreadable expression. Then, to Rin's shock, he knelt down to meet his gaze. "You are the one," the alien said, his voice soft but filled with gravity. "The last heir of the Ajurian Empire." Rin's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The heir? He was just a street kid. How could he possibly be related to any royal family? "Your parents, the previous rulers, died years ago. You were hidden away, left to grow up in obscurity. But now the time has come for you to take your place." The alien stood up and looked around the crowd. "The Empire needs its heir, and you, Rin, are that heir." Rin felt dizzy. His mind raced as the world around him seemed to spin. This couldn't be real. How could a boy like him, a nobody from the slums, be the heir to an empire? There had to be some mistake. "What do you mean?" Rin whispered, his voice shaking. "I don't understand. I'm just a kid. I don't know anything about being a ruler. I don't even know who my parents were." The alien's expression softened, and he placed a hand on Rin's shoulder. "You don't need to know everything, not yet. What matters is that the blood of the Ajurian rulers flows through your veins. And now you have a responsibility. You must claim your throne. Your destiny awaits. Rin shook his head, trying to step back, but the alien's hand held him in place. The crowd had begun to murmur, and some people were even smiling, as if they had been waiting for this moment their entire lives. "This is wrong," Rin said, his voice growing louder. "I'm not a prince. I'm just a kid from the streets. I don't want to rule anything." The alien's gaze hardened. "You do not have a choice, Rin. Your life is no longer your own. You are the heir, and the Empire will not allow you to refuse." Before Ryan could say anything else, the alien turned and motioned for him to follow. "Come, there is much to discuss. You must learn quickly, for the future of the Empire depends on you." As Rin was led away, his mind was a blur. He couldn't understand how his life had just been turned upside down. He was just a boy, a nobody. And now he was supposed to become a prince. The last thing he saw before being taken onto the alien ship was the crowd of people staring at him with awe and expectation. Their eyes were filled with hope, and he realized, for the first time, that he wasn't just an orphan anymore. He had a name, a title, and a future he never asked for. But what if it was a future he couldn't escape? The royal invitation. The ship's interior was nothing like anything Ryan had ever imagined. The walls gleamed with polished metals and glowing panels, casting soft light that made everything feel more surreal. Rin stepped inside the craft, his feet barely touching the ground. The air was perfectly cool, and the silence was unnerving. His heart still raced, but his legs had begun to move on their own, guided by the alien who had claimed him as the heir to an empire. He could hear the murmurs of the royal attendants as they passed by, but they did not speak to him. It felt as though they were all waiting for something, maybe for Rin to prove he deserved to be here. He could feel their eyes on him, and he could barely stand the weight of their expectations. The alien who had first addressed him, the one with glowing eyes and a regal presence, turned to Rin and spoke in the calm tone he had used earlier. "This ship will take you to your new home, the Palace of Ajurian. You are not alone in this, but you must be prepared. What lies ahead will test you, young Heir. Your destiny is already set." Rin nodded, though he didn't fully understand. His mind was still foggy, trying to piece together what was happening to him. One moment he had been scavenging for food on the streets, and now he was on a spaceship, heading to an alien palace, where he was supposed to rule. It didn't make sense. He was no prince. He didn't belong in a place like this. As they moved through the corridors of the ship, Rin was led to a small chamber that was far more comfortable than anything he had ever known. The room had soft furnishings, strange devices on the walls, and a bed that looked like it had been designed by beings from another world. It was all so overwhelming, and Rin didn't know what to do with himself. "You will stay here until we arrive," the alien said, his voice still calm, but now tinged with an air of finality. "You must rest. Tomorrow, you will meet the rest of the royal family." With that, the door slid shut behind him, and Rin was left alone in the strange room. The silence pressed against him, and the weight of his new life settled onto his shoulders. He couldn't escape it. No matter how much he wanted to scream, no matter how badly he wanted to wake up from this bizarre dream, he was now bound to a fate he couldn't control. As the ship continued its journey, Rum lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the ship's engines. He had no idea what awaited him on the other side of this journey, but one thing was certain: he was never going to be the same. Hours passed, and the ship slowly began to decelerate, signaling that they were nearing their destination. Rin could feel a change in the air, the subtle shift that told him they were no longer alone in the vastness of space. The quiet buzz in his chest grew louder with every passing second. Soon the craft began to dock, and Rin was once again summoned. This time, the alien who had brought him aboard was not alone. Two other figures stood beside him, their expressions unreadable. One was a tall, regal woman with sharp features and a commanding presence, while the other was a younger man, dressed in simple yet elegant attire. The air around them seemed to crackle with power, and Rin could feel it, like a pressure against his skin. They were royalty, and they were watching him. "We've arrived," the alien said, his voice stern now, as if to remind Rin that this was no longer a matter of choice. "You will be presented to the royal family. Do not falter. Your actions will determine your future." Rin felt his palms go clammy, but he nodded. He had no choice. There was no escaping this now. The grand entrance to the palace of Ajurian was unlike anything Ryan could have ever imagined. Massive, gleaming structures stretched high into the sky, with smooth, reflective surfaces that sparkled in the light of distant stars. The palace itself was an intricate web of advanced technology and alien architecture, each hall and chamber more magnificent than the last. Rin walked beside the alien as they made their way through the marble halls. The floor beneath him shimmered with faintly glowing patterns, and the walls were adorned with breathtaking works of art, depicting long-forgotten battles and legends of the Ajurian Empire. As they approached a large set of double doors, Rin could feel the tension in the air thickening. Behind those doors was the royal family, the people who would decide his fate. The alien gave a final nod to Rin before he stepped forward and signaled for the doors to be opened. The large doors creaked open slowly, revealing an extravagant throne room filled with dozens of royal attendants, each one watching with keen interest. At the far end of the room sat an imposing figure on a golden throne. The figure wore a crown, and their eyes gleamed with a mixture of power and wisdom. Rin's breath caught in his throat as he took in the sight of the ruler of the Ajurian Empire, Empress Salara, his supposed grandmother. Her presence filled the room, and even though Rin had never met her, he could feel the weight of her gaze. The power she exuded was palpable, and the room seemed to pulse with it. She was everything Rin was not: powerful, untouchable, regal. "Rin," she said, her voice soft but commanding. "It has been a long time since a member of my bloodline has returned to claim what is rightfully theirs. You may not understand it yet, but you will." Rin felt his legs tremble beneath him as he tried to find his voice. I don't belong here. I'm just a boy. I don't know anything about ruling. This isn't my place." Empress Salara's eyes softened for a brief moment before hardening again. "You have no choice, child. This is your destiny. Whether you want it or not, you are now the heir to the Ajurian Empire, and you'll do whatever it takes to protect it." With that, she gestured to the throne beside hers. "Sit, Rin," she commanded, "and begin to learn what it means to rule." Rin's heart raced, and though he was terrified, he slowly stepped forward and took the seat beside her. The weight of the crown, and the expectations that came with it, was more than he could have ever imagined. As he sat there, his world changed forever. The dangerous politics of the Empire, the days on the ship blurred into one another. Rin spent most of his time alone in the chambers provided for him, feeling more like a prisoner than a royal heir. His mind raced with questions, but no one would answer them. The alien who had first spoken to him, a tall figure named Varen, was distant and formal, always offering cryptic words about the future. The other attendants barely acknowledged him, moving quickly through the halls with their eyes lowered, as if afraid to look at him directly. It was only when they arrived at the capital planet of Ajuria that Rin began to understand the gravity of his situation. The capital was breathtaking, a sprawling city with towering structures of shimmering glass and metal, floating gardens suspended in the air, and streets alive with beings from every corner of the galaxy. Ships of all shapes and sizes hovered above the ground, moving like a fluid dance across the sky. Rin's heart skipped a beat as he looked around. He had never seen anything like this before, but amidst the beauty, something darker lingered in the air. He could sense it. The eyes of the citizens followed him wherever he went. Whispers passed between them. The name of the orphan boy who had become the heir to the most powerful empire in the galaxy was already spreading like wildfire. Rin's first taste of palace life was nothing like the peaceful, quiet rooms he had grown accustomed to on the ship. The palace of Adurian was a labyrinth of hallways, grand chambers, and towering towers that seemed to stretch endlessly upward. The walls were adorned with strange art from countless worlds, each piece more beautiful and alien than the last. But the beauty was cold, distant, like the place itself was trying to hide its true nature. It didn't take long for Rin to realize that he was not welcome here. The royal court was full of glances, some curious, some hostile. He was a stranger in their midst, the orphan from the streets who had somehow inherited their throne. The courtiers, dressed in their finest robes, whispered behind their hands when he passed, eyes filled with doubt or disdain. They didn't want him here. He wasn't one of them. Rin's only interaction with the royal family was with Princess Selara, the one he was supposed to marry. She was everything he had imagined royalty to be, elegant, poised, with an aura of confidence that made everyone around her take notice. She was beautiful, with dark eyes that seemed to see through him, and long hair that shimmered like the stars in the sky. But there was something about her that made Rin uneasy. When they first met in the grand hall of the palace, Selara's greeting had been cold, almost mechanical. She barely acknowledged him as she spoke, her tone polite but distant. "Welcome, Prince Rin," she had said, her voice soft but controlled. "I trust your journey here was acceptable." Rin had nodded, unsure of what to say. The room was filled with other royals, all looking at him with undisguised curiosity. Some of them even seemed to pity him, while others looked at him with suspicion, as if they knew something he didn't. "You are to be my husband, my ally," Selara continued, her eyes never leaving his. "Together we will rule this empire. But know this, I did not choose this, and neither did you." Rin had tried to speak, but his throat went dry. What was there to say? He didn't want to be part of this life. He wanted to go back to Korea, to the streets he knew, to the life he had been living. But there was no way back. His destiny had been decided for him. The thought sent a chill through him. And then, just as Rin thought the conversation would end, Princess Selara's voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible above the hum of the room. "The marriage is not just for show, Rin. It's a political move. The other royal houses are watching us. There are forces here that want to see us fail. You must be careful who you trust." Her words left Rin in stunned silence. He had never thought of this as anything more than a forced union, a way to settle some galactic dispute. But now it seemed there were deeper, darker forces at play. This marriage was not just about peace, it was about power, control, and survival. Rin spent the next few days locked in his rooms, trying to wrap his mind around everything that had been said. Every day, he grew more isolated from the rest of the palace. His servants were silent and obedient, never speaking to him unless spoken to. The other courtiers avoided him as if his presence was a curse. He was a pawn in a game of galactic politics, and he had no idea how to play. But then, on the fourth night after his arrival, he received a message. It was from an unknown source, sent through a secure channel. The message was simple but terrifying. "They know about you, Rin. You are in grave danger. Trust no one, not even the princess." Rin's heart raced as he stared at the message, his hands trembling. Who had sent this? And why? The message was clear. Someone within the palace, perhaps even someone close to him, was plotting against him. There were enemies in the shadows, and they would stop at nothing to see him fall. The cold princess and hidden foes. The first time Ryan met Princess Lyra, it was not the grand, royal occasion he had imagined. It wasn't a moment of awe or admiration. Instead, it was a confrontation, a cold, silent stare between two people bound by fate, yet worlds apart. The princess stood at the center of the grand hall, her figure tall and graceful, her silver blue gown shimmering like liquid starlight. Her pale skin contrasted with the dark, rich tones of the room, and her long black hair framed her face like a crown. But what struck Rin the most were her eyes that gleamed with a sharp, unsettling intelligence. It was clear she was not impressed by the orphan boy who had come to her world. Rin stood awkwardly in the doorway, unsure of how to proceed. The royal guards around him stood rigid, their eyes scanning him as though waiting for him to make the wrong move. But Princess Lyra's gaze remained locked on his, her expression unreadable. "You must be the one they call the Heir," Lyra said, her voice as smooth and cold as ice. There was no warmth in her tone, only calculation. She spoke not as a princess, but as a ruler who had seen too many would-be kings come and go. Rin swallowed, feeling the weight of her gaze pierce through him. I didn't ask for this," he said, his voice small compared to the vastness of the room. Lyra's lips barely curled into a smile, but there was no kindness in it. "None of us ask for the roles we are given. You think I wanted to be the heir to the throne of a Juria? No, I was born into it. As were you. You don't have a choice." Rin felt the sting of her words. She spoke the truth, but it was a truth he hadn't wanted to hear. The idea that his life had already been written, that he was nothing more than a piece in someone else's game, made his stomach twist. But as the silence grew between them, Rin couldn't shake the feeling that something more was happening here. Something was hidden beneath Lyra's icy exterior, something that might be more dangerous than the Empire itself. She wasn't just a cold princess, she was a prisoner in her own right, just like him. Before Rin could speak again, the door to the hall slid open with a loud hiss, and a tall, shadowy figure entered. His eyes were hidden beneath a hood, and his movements were quick and deliberate. He gave off a sense of authority, even though Rin couldn't place his identity. "Your Highness," the figure said with a deep, gravelly voice, bowing low to Lyra. "The time is short. You know what must be done." Rin's curiosity spiked. Who was this man, and why did his words send a ripple of unease through the room? The princess's face tightened, her eyes flicking briefly to Rin before returning to the mysterious figure. "I understand," Lyra replied, her voice now clipped and firm. "Leave us." The figure hesitated for only a moment before turning and exiting the room as swiftly as he had entered. Rin's mind raced. There was something about that exchange that didn't sit right. Lyra wasn't just cold, she was dangerous. She wasn't interested in playing the role of a dutiful princess. She was playing a game of her own, one that Rin had unwittingly stepped into. When the doors closed behind the mysterious man, Lyra turned back to Rin, her expression softer but no less intense. "Do not think for a second that I am your ally, boy," she said, her tone now more personal, almost warning. "There are forces within this empire that will stop at nothing to see you fail. The marriage isn't just a political union. It's a way to control you, control both of us. They will use me to make sure you obey, and you will be the puppet they pull by the strings." Rin's stomach dropped. He hadn't thought of it that way. He had thought the marriage was just a way to seal peace between two empires, but Lyra made it clear. It was far more than that. It was a trap, and they were both caught in it. "Why are you telling me this?" Rin asked, his voice betraying the doubt and confusion swirling inside him. Lyra leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving his. "Because you are not the only one trapped here, and I will not be your enemy, not unless I have to. But you should know this, if you think you can escape or fight back, you will not win. There are many who want you dead, and the only way to survive is to play their game, for now." Rin's heart pounded in his chest. He felt the weight of her words, the cold reality of his situation. He was no longer an orphan. He was an heir, a pawn in a dangerous game of thrones, and his survival depended on how well he played along. But for how long could he trust Lyra? How long could they both survive in a world where every smile was a lie and every word could be a dagger in disguise? As the princess turned and left the room, Rin stood frozen, his mind a whirlwind of questions. The Empire wasn't just a place of power, it was a place of shadows, where enemies hid behind smiles and allies were as dangerous as foes. And in this strange, foreign palace, Rin realized the greatest threat might not be from outside the walls, but from within them. The web of deceit days turned into weeks, and Rin found himself trapped in a world of gold and danger. The grand halls of the palace of Adurian were no longer a source of awe. They had become a maze designed to trap him, to suffocate him with rules and expectations that he never signed up for. The whispers of the court grew louder, but no one spoke directly to him. It was as though he were both a king and a pawn in a game too complex for him to understand. His interactions with Princess Lyra remained tense. She was always distant, her icy demeanor never wavering. She was a queen in training, and her eyes were always calculating. But there was something else, something deeper in her gaze, something Rhine couldn't quite place. He could feel it, a subtle tension between them, an undercurrent of something unspoken. Was she his ally? Or was she just another player in the Empire's deadly Game of Thrones? One night, as Rhyn wandered the quiet halls of the palace, trying to escape his thoughts, he overheard a conversation that would change everything. He had been told to avoid certain parts of the palace, but his curiosity got the better of him. Quietly, he slipped past a row of guards, his footsteps muffled against the polished floors. The hallway he found himself in was dimly lit, the soft glow of distant lights faintly illuminating the stone walls. From behind a corner, he heard voices, low and urgent. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. "It's too risky," a deep voice murmured. "The boy is the key, but the princess, she can't know. She'll ruin everything." A second voice, sharper, more familiar, answered, "We don't have a choice. The rebellion is growing, and the crown, her crown, is weak. If we want to see our empire rise again, we need to control the Heir. He's our only chance." Rhyn's blood ran cold. He knew that voice. It was Varen, the alien who had brought him here, the one who had spoken of destiny and duty. But now he was talking about him, about controlling him. Rhyn's mind raced. Rebellion. Empire rising again. What was Varen talking about? And who were these people who wanted to use him as a pawn in their twisted game? Before he could gather his thoughts, another voice cut through the air, and Rhyn froze. "The princess won't know until it's too late," the voice whispered. "She's been blinded by her father's lies. We've been waiting for this moment too long to let her stand in our way." The weight of those words hit Rhyn like a hammer. There was more to this palace than met the eye. More to the politics, more to the promises of peace. The empire was fractured, broken, and Rhyn was at the center of it all, whether he wanted to be or not. His breath caught in his throat as he backed away from the corner, retreating into the shadows. The voices grew faint, but the realization was clear. He wasn't just the heir to a throne. He was a piece in a deadly game, a game that could cost him everything. The next day, Rhyn sought out Princess Lyra, his mind a whirlwind of questions and fear. She was in the royal gardens, walking alone, her eyes distant and full of thought. When she saw him approach, she didn't flinch. Instead, she stopped and raised an eyebrow, her face still unreadable. "What is it, orphan?" she asked, her tone flat, as if she were merely humoring him. Rhyn didn't hesitate. "I overheard something about a rebellion, about people wanting to use me, control me." He paused, searching her face for any hint of recognition or surprise. "Is it true?" Lyra's expression didn't change, but the flicker in her eyes was enough. "It's not something you need to worry about," she said, her voice steady but cold. "The rebellion is not our concern. It's a problem for the council. For now, you will do what you're told. Play the part of the prince, and I will play my part as princess." Rhyn felt a chill spread through him. Play the part. Those words, coming from her, made him feel like a puppet on strings that were being pulled by powers far beyond his control. "But what if I don't want to play anymore?" Rhyn asked, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. "What if I want to choose my own path?" For the first time, a small smile appeared on Lyra's lips. It was not a warm smile. It was a smile of someone who had learned the truth long ago. "You don't get to choose, Rhyn. None of us do." And in that moment, Rhyn understood. He was no longer an orphan. He was a royal prisoner, trapped in a web of deceit with no way out. But if he had learned anything in his short life, it was that survival was a fight, and he wasn't ready to lose just yet. The rising storm. Rin's heart pounded in his chest as he listened to the whispers from behind the corner. His hands trembled, and for a moment he considered running, but his feet were rooted to the floor, as though the words he had overheard had frozen him in place. The rebellion, his role as the heir to the throne. What did all of this mean? The voices continued, but now Rin could make out the details. "We've waited too long," the deeper voice said. "If we don't act soon, the princess will solidify her power. She's too dangerous to leave alive. The boy, however, he's still malleable. He doesn't understand his place yet." The second voice, one that sounded disturbingly familiar, was even colder. "Don't underestimate her. She's more capable than you think. She may be young, but she won't be easy to sway. And as for the boy, he's more than just a pawn. If the princess dies, he'll take her place. We can't afford to make the wrong move." The conversation ended abruptly, and Rin's blood ran cold. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Someone wanted the princess dead, and the rebellion was closer than he had imagined. But more terrifyingly, he was being used as a tool in a power struggle that he never asked to be a part of. Rin turned and quickly retreated, his mind racing. He didn't know who these people were, whether they were part of the royal court or enemies within, but he could feel the danger closing in. The rebellion wasn't just an abstract threat, it was real. And if they could so easily plot against the princess, what did that mean for him? For his future? Was he just a puppet, or could he control his own destiny? The next few days were filled with uncertainty. The palace that had once seemed so majestic now felt like a cage. Every glance he received seemed laced with hidden meaning. The guards, the courtiers, even the servants, none of them seemed to trust him. They watched his every move, and he could feel the weight of their silent judgment. But there was one person who continued to watch him from afar, whose presence seemed to hover over him like a shadow. Princess Lyra. She never spoke directly to him, but her gaze was always there, calculating, weighing him, as if she were trying to figure out who he truly was, and more importantly, what role he would play in her future. It was in one of their rare encounters that she finally spoke to him again. "You overheard something, didn't you?" Her voice was quiet, almost too quiet, but there was no mistaking the intensity in her words. Her eyes never left his, and Rin felt the cold weight of her scrutiny. He didn't know what to say. Should he lie? Should he pretend to be ignorant? Lyra's lips curled into a smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "Don't worry. I've known for a while that I'm not the only one keeping secrets here. But you should be careful, Rin. You might be the heir, but you're still just a boy, one they'll discard when they're done with you." Rin's throat tightened. Her words hit him like a blow, but there was something else in them. A warning? Or was she trying to drive him further into the chaos of palace politics? He couldn't tell. "I'm not a boy anymore," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "And I don't plan on being anyone's puppet." Lyra tilted her head, studying him for a moment. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, her gown swishing behind her like a shroud. But just before she disappeared around the corner, she glanced back, her gaze unreadable. "Remember, Rin," she said softly, "this throne is built on blood, and no one ever sits on it for long." Her words echoed in his mind, long after she was gone. This throne is built on blood. The weight of her statement sank in, and for the first time, Rin truly understood what it meant to be a part of this royal family. Power, in the empire of Ajuria, wasn't just inherited. It was taken, it was fought for, and it was a prize that only the strongest survived to claim. But Rin wasn't ready to give up just yet. He had a destiny to reclaim and a rebellion to stop. Whether he had the strength to survive it, though, was another matter entirely. As the days stretched on, Rin felt the storm brewing around him. The conspiracy was deeper than he could have ever imagined, and the enemies were everywhere. He was no longer just a pawn in someone else's game. He had become a player himself. The question now was, could he outsmart them before they outsmarted him? The choice that defines a kingdom. The tension in the palace had reached a boiling point. The walls of Adurian, once a symbol of power and grace, now felt like the bars of a cage. Rin had spent the last several days in a whirlwind of events, secret meetings, veiled threats, and whispers in the dark. The rebellion was closer than ever, its shadow hanging over the kingdom like a storm waiting to strike. And in the center of it all stood Rin, still the orphan boy, still the unwitting Heir, but no longer ignorant of the stakes. He had spent countless hours in the palace library, poring over ancient texts and royal documents, trying to piece together what was happening around him. Everything he had learned only added to his confusion and fear. The rebellion, as it turned out, wasn't just a group of disgruntled citizens. It was a faction of powerful nobles, military leaders, and even former royal family members, people who wanted control of the empire and were willing to kill anyone in their path to get it. The Princess Lyra was a pawn in their game, and so was Rin. But what if they weren't just pawns? What if they had the power to change the game entirely? Rin had thought long and hard about his role in this empire, his role in this life. He could see the cracks in the system, the corruption that ran through the veins of the palace. He could see how the royal court, with all its grandeur and power, was built on lies and bloodshed. But he also saw something else, the possibility for change. The chance to rebuild, to break free from the cycle of violence and deceit that had consumed Adurian for centuries. But there was a price, and it was a price he hadn't fully understood until now. It was the night before his supposed wedding to Princess Lyra. The ceremony was meant to unite their empires, solidify his position as Heir, and bring peace to the galaxy. But nothing about it felt peaceful to Rhine. He stood in his chambers, staring out the large window that overlooked the sprawling city below. The sky was a deep violet, stars twinkling like scattered diamonds. But even the beauty of the night felt hollow. He had grown to admire the princess, despite the coldness she showed him. He had seen the weight of the crown she carried on her shoulders, the loneliness in her eyes when no one was watching. She wasn't just a political tool, as he had once thought. She was a person, just like him, trapped in a world of expectations, forced to play a role she never wanted. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Rin turned to see Lyra standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice quieter than he meant it to be. "Not tonight." Lyra stepped inside, her presence filling the room. "Neither should you," she replied, her voice sharp yet tinged with something softer. "I know what you heard." Rin's heart skipped. The rebellion, the plot against her life. It was no longer a secret between the shadows. She knew he was aware of everything. "I've heard it all," Rin said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But what I don't understand is, why haven't you done anything? Why have you let them control you?" Her gaze softened, but only slightly. "Because sometimes survival means playing the game," she said, stepping closer. "And sometimes it means pretending you don't have a choice, even when you do." Rin's mind raced. The rebellion wasn't just a threat to the throne, it was a threat to everything they had built, to the future of the galaxy itself. But more than that, it was a threat to the lives of the people he had come to care about. And now it was a threat to him, and to Lyra too. He had learned that the palace was full of treachery, but now he understood the real danger. The choice between doing what was expected or forging a new path. A path where he and Lyra could change the future, not just follow the old rules. But that path was fraught with peril. They could die. They could lose everything. "Tomorrow," Lyra whispered, "the choice will be ours. Will we play the game, or will we rewrite the rules?" Rin's pulse quickened. This was the moment. He had always been a pawn. But tomorrow, he could be the one who decided who won the game. And as the weight of his decision pressed down on him, he finally realized one undeniable truth. He had never truly been an orphan. He had always belonged to something greater than himself, to the galaxy, to the empire, and now to the future. The choice was his, and tomorrow he would make it.